Before we move any further and try rendering the data that's present within heroes and within villains, one of the things that we might want to do is make sure that our CSS and HTML can appropriately style the content that we want to render. In this case, we're going to be using Bootstrap CSS. And so one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to go to public and open up index.html. Within index.html, I shall be pasting. In this case, I'm going to be using Bootstrap, their style sheets, and in the future, if needed, maybe some of their JavaScript functions. I'm going to be changing the title to Superhero Picker React Application. In addition to this, I'll be going to index.css, and I'm going to make sure that some content is aligned in the center. I shall be aligning all divs in the center and the body in the center with some background color. Coming to the React application, it says over here the development server is disconnected. So one of the things that we're going to do is preview this once again. And there we go. Right now, again, there's no content in it. I'm going to pop this out. And while it's not displaying anything, we know the content hopefully will show up. Again, this allows us to see the JavaScript console. If we're concerned that the arrays over here are showing 0, 0 on lines 24 and 44, one of the things that we could do is we can go back and ensure this console log data is actually coming down. And so once we do that, we see that the data is actually there. Let's come back here. Now, to display this data, one of the things that we've got to do is we've got to make sure that our app is prepared to actually render this data out. There are lots of ways that we could actually do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a nested structure for divs. Since I'm using Bootstrap, I shall say that I'm going to start off with a div. And React's JSX does not allow us to use the class tag, and so we've got to use class name. And the class name I'm going to specify is row. This is the grid-based structure for Bootstrap. Another div I'm going to have within this, and every opening div has to be closed or should be closed, and the class name for this is going to be call-md-12. Within this, I shall be having a table. Specifically, I'm going to say that it's going to be a responsive table. So I'm going to have really another div over here. And this div is going to be and what this does is it creates a responsive div for a table that's actually going to display our data. If you want to make sure our content is indented properly, I can indent as I choose. This creates a structure for a generic table. With these tables, I'm going to have table rows, and these table rows are actually going to display the data that I'm interested in. One of the things we want to think about is how we would like to render this data out. In this case, I imagine us having two rows. One row for heroes and the other row for villains. And so subsequently, we can say that we might have two rows a hero row, and maybe a villain row. And within these rows, we can have the pictures that are present coming in from the data. Just to make sure we actually have some data in here, I'm just going to have a TD and say heroes. And when we come here, we see that we have two rows: a row of villains, a row of heroes, a row for villains. In fact, so you can see we have heroes, a horizontal ruler, villains. Okay, so let's think about how we would like these heroes and villains to be rendered. Now, since if one actually takes a look at the data, we have 20 heroes and 20 villains. We can see that each individual has a name and some characteristic or some data. Specifically, one of the properties is images, which tells us an image location where we can actually bring an image down and display the image. And so one of the things that we can do is we can think about displaying these images as thumbnails right here. 20 heroes and 20 villains across these two rows over here. To do that, what I shall be doing is creating another functional component. A component is basically a piece of React code that does something specific, that does a deliberate piece of work. In this case, what I want to do is display an image. And so I'm going to say that I'm going to have a functional component over here called img thumb. And this component is going to get some properties. Properties are basically data that is passed down from the main function, the app functional component, down to the image thumb component. The reason the app component can pass data down is because the app component is managing all the data. The data it is managing is the data regarding the heroes and the villains, because these arrays are declared within the app component. These aren't global arrays, but these are arrays declared within the app component. And so the data within the app component can be passed down to other components declared outside of the app component. And this function, specifically image thumb, is declared outside of the app component. And so we can pass this data down as a property to the image thumb component. So what would we like this image thumb component to do? Before we actually see anything, let's see whether we can console.log what these properties possibly could be. And so let's imagine that I have within this table row over here an image thumb component. Let us see what this image thumb component does. And so at the moment, I shall say I'm going to be rendering this image thumb component within app, within the return function of app. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is that this image thumb component is expecting a property. And so we need to make sure that we send it some data, send it some property. So let's say, for instance, I'm going to be sending it the data about, for instance, heroes. And so let's say this is going to receive some posts, and the data it is actually going to receive as posts is going to be the heroes array. And so I want to make sure this is actually image thumb. There we go. And so the data is going to come in. The data that image thumb is going to receive is the heroes array. It's going to come in as properties, and I'm going to console log properties. Let's see what this does. Well, at the moment, it does nothing at all. I'm just going to refresh this. And we see nothing was returned from the render. This usually means a return statement is missing. At the moment, I need this function to have a return statement. I'm just going to say return, and this function is going to make sure that it actually returns something. And so what I shall have it do is I'm just going to make sure I have a div in here. So it actually has something in there. So let's double check and see whether we've lost the error. Refreshing this page. Okay, we see nothing in here. The word heroes does not exist. And coming down here, we see line 86 has something called posts array of 20. Well, what was on line 86? On line 86, we have console log props. And so obviously we have an array coming in, and the array that comes in, props, contains an array called posts, and posts has 20 things in it. Right? And so this gives us a sense that data in this case is being passed down from the image thumb component to it's being passed down to the image thumb component as a property. Now, what we would like to do is have something done with the data that is coming down to this image thumb component. So we see that each element in here is a post about a specific superhero, or about a specific superhero. And what we would love to do is to actually have this image of a superhero rendered out. For instance, we can take the medium image, for instance, MD, and try to render that medium image out through the use of an image tag. And this has to happen for each element in this array, each post. And so what I shall be doing is I shall be using the map function of arrays. So what I'm going to say is that return props.posts, right? So properties, for instance, has posts within it. And for the posts array, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the map function on the array of posts. And I'm going to indicate what I want to happen. I'm going to say for each post within this array, do something. And what I am going to do is I'm going to have a return take place. For each post, I want something returned, specifically a div created, right? In fact, I don't actually have to have this be a div, because if you notice, I am within a table row, so I'm not actually going to have a div created. I'm actually going to have a table column created, a TD created. Now, the scope of this TD is a row, and within this TD, I'm going to have an image tag. Now, this image tag is going to have a couple of components. First of all, this image tag is going to have an ID. And so I shall say the ID of this image is going to be, notice that each post has a name, right? The name of the superhero. And so I want to make sure that each image is uniquely identified. And I'm going to say each image has a name, post.name. Also, the source of each image is going to be some data that is present in each post. It is going to be each post dot images dot, in this case, for my purposes, it's going to be MD. So I shall be saying post dot images dot MD being the medium size image. And because I want this image to scale, right? Like if I just took this and I ran it, you see that I have 20 images here of superheroes. Now the problem with this is I want to scroll through all of them like this, right? And so because I'm trying to put this within a responsive table, one of the things I can do is I can say that this class is going to be, it's going to be img-fluid. So what this does is it allows the image to scale based on the larger element within which it exists. This class is again a bootstrap class. And so if I do this, we see that the image occupies this space right here. Just refreshing this. There we go. But this gives us a list of heroes up here. Now, one can replicate the very same thing and do it for villains. And so all I need to do is take this functional component, paste it down here, and instead of heroes, I shall say villains. And when I do that, I see sets of heroes and a set of villains right here.